So LUNARC and now also Dardel on at PDC, and shortly I think Brigitte said it would be, was it Kebnekaise or Rackham that's that is shortly to have desktop on demand. It's one of those two. But anyway, so desktop on demand is a service that allows you to schedule interactive environments as jobs and send them to Slurm without a typical shell script. So you can use, and you interface with that using the Graphical Applications Launcher, or GFX Launcher, which is the GUI which is the little pop-up that appears whenever you click one of these applications. The GFX Launcher interface was actually developed in-house by our own department head. So we're quite proud of it, and eager to export it to the HPC centers around the country. For most of the session, you'll hear us talking about the GFX Launcher rather than the desktop on demand, because the desktop on demand is the underlying service, the underlying application, but the interface that you work with is the is GFX Launcher. There are a lot of different coding languages in here that you, as you can see, that have an IDE or interactive development environment available through the on-demand desktop. So for this one, we'll concentrate on Matlab. And there are other applications like Julia, for instance, that you can launch via a terminal session. So I will start by I'll start by pulling up a Matlab window, and let's do 2024 this time. So now I have this GFX Launcher window, and I'll go through all the different parts of it in a second. So I should tell you that so desktop on demand is most appropriate for interactive work that requires a small to medium amount of computing resources. So if you're going to be running a job for 2 straight days, that's probably not the best to use the GUI, although technically you can for this, but up to 2 for the MATLAB version that is not CPU, that does not have CPU next to it, the upper limit is 2 days. For the version that has CPU next to it, you can run it for the full 7 days, same as a regular Slurm script. But the CPU version is more limited in what you can do with, is more limited in graphics support. I should also warn you that if you're doing interactive work, but you ask for 2 full days for this regular Matlab GUI, or if you ask for the full 7 days on the CPU specific GUI, you can encounter very significant queuing times. So, and there can still be significant startup delays for wall times as short as 4 hours. So you should save your work frequently and be conservative in your wall time estimates. And to save on GPU resources, we encourage users who are able to submit jobs to Slurm with minimal supervision to submit either ordinary batch scripts or submit to batch from Matlab, and then just close the GUI and let it go. So anytime that you can automate something and have it run with minimal supervision, do it. It saves us resources and it lets more users do their work when they have to be interactive. Some applications will let you configure and submit separate batch jobs that are not bound by the parameters of this GUI. So Matlab is actually the prime example of this. Whatever specifications you provide here. So I have this set for a wall time of 30 minutes. four tasks per node on an Intel node with a graphics partition. And if I pull up these resources, I can adjust the task per node and all of that stuff. All of these resources apply to the GUI itself. If you then execute one of those batch commands in the Matlab GUI, or basically run any of the jobs that Pedro demonstrated in the session before last, then the resources that you set in the Slurm scheduler are what apply to those. They're not bound by these parameters right here. So, and if you have to close the GUI after submitting one of those batch jobs, don't worry, it'll still be running. I already showed you where the applications are. If you don't see the application that you want to run immediately, you may want to go to, for the case of Matlab, you would probably want to use this one and go to the graphics terminal. And in this case, again, the resources are exactly the same as they were for the Matlab. The default resources actually for this graphics terminal are the same as they are for Matlab when it's the non-CPU version. So if you were to run one of these graphics terminals, then you could launch a Matlab GUI from the command line if you needed to. Still not the best option if you can avoid it, but things happen. But anyway, already went over those lists. Please be aware that only the applications that are prefixed with applications and the applications that are listed in the menus to the right, these are the ones that are enabled with OnDemand. If you were to scroll down to something like this programming option and see Visual Studio Code, that is not enabled with OnDemand. So this would be running on the front end. So we don't generally encourage users to use VS Code very much. We're hoping to have it incorporated into these applications soonish. Oh, I think it already is there. Yes, it has been incorporated. So use these. If you want to use Visual Studio Code, you want to use these, not the one that's in programming. And if you're on Dardal, the applications menus looks very similar. It's except instead of applications dash, it'll be PDC dash. And I can show that momentarily. For most programs, the startup process is roughly the same. You'll go to your applications, you pick the application, and then this window pops up, and you set your resources with these menus. So I already showed you the wall time. For this, it goes up to 48. For the CPU version, the drop-down menu only goes up to 48, but you can actually type in 176 hours, or 168 hours for the full 7 days. Most of the time, the requirements that are given as the default are fine, but if you need to adjust them, you can click this little gear icon. And this lets you set the name of the job, for one, the number of tasks per node, which you can click up or down, or you can select the full node, and that will get rid of those two options. Or there's also the option where if you need to have the memory for a particular job or a particular task confined to one node, or one core, but an individual core doesn't have enough memory when the memory is distributed equally among all cores, what you can do is go to this memory option and revise up the amount of memory for the given nodes, the number of nodes that you've selected. But it's important to realize that if you do this, what that does is that it forces the active cores to borrow memory from other cores. So that renders some of the cores idle and unable to be used. So for instance, if you change this to 1060, which is the number of memory that's normally spread over 2 cores, you're still using 2 cores worth of work, and that's how much you would have to pay for, because you're effectively taking 2 nodes. Even if you're only technically using 1 core, you've borrowed all the memory from a second core, so it's still offline. And you need to, that's, if you're paying for that project yourself, and then you would have to pay for that. If you have a reservation, now this typically applies more to GPU jobs, but if you have a reservation, you can type it in here. Or normally, if you have a reservation, it'll appear in a drop-down menu. I don't need one since I'm an admin, and I have sort of an ongoing project account, but you may have something like that. So I'll let those be canceled. And then here's where you pick your project. Mine is this teacher's account, but you probably have one of these 2, or one that's 32. And sometimes you're allowed to pick other partitions here. So this one allows you to also pick an AMD AMD core that also has a GPU partition, and it has even more cores. But because it's an even scarcer resource, the limit is even lower. So for this type of node, the limit is only 24 hours because it's so in demand. So use the lowest amount of resources that you can afford. And now I will give this a start. See, do any of these menu options that we've covered so far, any questions? I don't see any. So I'm going to click this more. And one of the things you can do if you're wondering why a job is taking a really long time to start, for instance, you can go to this more and click log. And sometimes the output will tell you something about what is causing the holdup. It's not always useful, but sometimes it is. Particularly if there's something going wrong in the startup script. And so I clicked start. As soon as the job made it into the queue, this little box over here turned green. And now my application is open. And now I must reiterate, leave this box open. You can close the more section, but you need to leave this whole window open, because otherwise it'll close. If you click close for this, it'll close the main app that it's dictating. Also, it's handy to have up so you can see how much time you have left. So this is 2024B. Now, if you forgot to run your config shell script before coming in here, you can do cluster config right here. No. Is it config cluster? I think I got it backwards. Where'd it go? There it is. Must be config cluster. There we go. Yes. So Aurora has been decommissioned, so you don't want to choose that. So just pick 2. Eventually, we'll get rid of the Cosmos option. And then these are the options that you have to select, or that you have to set before you can have your profile made up. And now account name is a little bit misleading because this usually has to be a project name. So C equals par cluster. So let's see, get this, copy this, and then set additional properties. And I'm going to set it as see, this is that. Set the default wall time. You can change this at the schedule. You can change this in the schedule scheduler plugin after the fact as well. So I already said that 4 hours and up tends to lead to long queue time. So I'm going to bump this down to 2 hours. And then click C.save profile. And there we go. Now, if I go over here, I can, so it will let me scroll over there. There, I can select this. And, or I can toggle between these two environments. So I had already had an environment that was set up for 2023B. It's strongly advised that you stick with the profile that you've set up for each individual version. I mean, in fact, you have to, initially you have to do that. So you have to config, you have to run config cluster for each individual release, at least the very first time you run it. So then you can go to parallel preferences, and you can, for this, that's the default profile, but if you want to tweak anything that you, if you want to tweak anything in particular, if you want to run any sort of like validation, or if you want to change parameters of the scheduler plugin, you can go here and then click edit. So, it didn't save the account name. So the account name that it actually has here is the one that's our ongoing teachers account instead of the LU test account that admins use. Must be something else. Anyway, so the default number. Oh, so this is not, did not take the. It didn't take the profile changes. Maybe it was because I ran it before. Anyway, but this is the primary way that you want to change any parameters in the scheduler plugin, or if you want to change other options about the cluster profile. Oh, this is 2023B. Sorry, I selected the wrong one. So yes, you can see I set it to 2 hours earlier. I set the account name to LU test. I can, if I wanted to change that to the teacher's account, I can do this 2024-68. So remember, it's kind of confusing, but account name is actually your project name, not like your username or anything like that. It's the project name. So procs per node, I typically drop that down to 32 just in case, because if I end up on the because these, I should note that these profiles are preserved across the regular and CPU versions. So the if procs per node defaults to 48, it might try to start 48 tasks on a 32 core node. So I prefer to set it a bit lower. So what else? 32. use default. Let's see, another thing you can do is you can set your default storage location. Let's see, where do I want to do that? Folder where job data is stored on the client. That's okay. You don't actually want to change that. Never mind. Where was the folder where you actually save the outputs?
We need to round up in a minute.
Okay. All right. Well, I think I've shown most of the things that you would have to edit. Oh, okay. Preferred number of pool workers, that's usually okay. Default number workers of range. It says 1 to infinity. In practice, this is sort of just set to however many it can access. So it's recommended that you kind of leave these alone. So I will set that to done. And if you need to, you can also run this validation if something isn't running correctly when you try if something goes wrong with your parallel pool. Sometimes running this can help and see where it fails. I'm not going to do it here because this SPMD job test can take a very long time. But anyway, so, okay. Parallel preferences. I think that pretty much covers it. Any questions on this? Well, since Rose is the only one here and she uses LUNARC, I'm probably not going to worry about the other facilities, but I did add them to the documentation.
Yes, and you will find some more index material, I think. So,
Yes.
And also in the material. Okay, I will take the screen back.